Have you ever really thought about the big differences? Growing up or living in a village versus a city that feel like such a core difference in experience.
It absolutely is. And it's a fascinating way to look everything, really. How we learn, how we live day to day, our health, the opportunities we get or
Um,
don't get.
exactly. And that's what we're getting into today. We've been looking at this really interesting online discussion. It was a YouTube video, Village versus City Life, a
Hmm.
real talk.
Hmm.
And it really gets into the nitty-gritty, the good and the bad of both lifestyles.
Yeah, and this isn't just, academic. For a lot of people, choosing between village and city life is a huge decision. It affects the whole family.
It really does.
So understanding what's involved, the details, it's valuable, whether you're making that choice or maybe you've lived both or you're just curious.
Totally. So whether you've experienced village life or city life or maybe bounce between them, we want to shed some light on the key differences. Today, our deep dive is focusing on, well, a few main things. Education, daily routines, how life actually feels, day-to-day health, of course, and critically economic opportunities. Both sides of the coin, village and city.
Sounds good. Where should we start? Education seems like a big one.
Yeah, let's start there. It often seems to be like the central point in this whole comparison, doesn't it?
It really does. And there's this common idea, right, that city education is just better.
Right. Better facilities, more resources.
Exactly. And, often that's true. City schools might have newer buildings, maybe more tech, bigger budgets from local taxes. You might see things like uh, fancy science labs or coding clubs that smaller village schools just can't afford.
And that makes sense, the funding part. But the video we watched brought up a really interesting counterpoint about village schools.
Uh-huh.
It talked about, like, the strong community feel
Hmm.
and teachers who are really committed, often deeply connected to the place. Does that kind of close-knit vibe maybe create, I don't know, better support for students?
That's a really good question. The video certainly hinted at that. This idea that in a village, everyone, teachers, parents, neighbors, might be more invested in a kid's success. It's more personal.
Yeah.
But there's another side to that. Do those dedicated village teachers get the same chances for ongoing training? Access to new methods. That's something more readily available in cities usually.
Hmm. That's a fair point.
Yeah,
Access isn't just about buildings, is it?
not at all.
And the discussion really highlighted this broader issue of access, especially beyond just the local school. We heard how families often move, like pack up everything, just so their kids can get into higher education or find specific courses.
It's a massive decision, a huge upheaval.
And there's the money side,
Oh, yeah. The financial difference is stark. The video mentioned village education often costs very little, maybe nothing directly to the family.
which is crucial for many.
Absolutely. But then you look at the city. Wow. Admission fees, tuition fees, extra coaching classes seem almost standard now. Plus daily transport costs. It all adds up incredibly fast.
It really does. And the video, it didn't hold back on showing how tough this makes things for village families.
No, it didn't.
You hear about parents making these huge sacrifices. Maybe one parent moves with the kids while the other stays behind, working multiple jobs just to pay for that city education.
It makes you think about the real cost, doesn't it? Not just the money, but the emotional toll, the separation.
Yeah. And is it always worth it? That's the underlying question, I suppose.
And what does it do to the villages left behind? When families feel they have to leave for their kids' future, it's a complicated ripple effect.
It really is. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk about the daily routine, the whole rhythm of life. Village versus city feels like night and day sometimes.
Totally different pace. The video described village mornings often starting, quite peacefully, maybe sounds of nature. People might start work early, like in farming, but there's maybe less frantic rush.
Right. A calmer start. Compared to the city where it's just bam. Traffic noise, construction, everyone rushing from the get-go.
Exactly. That sense of urgency hits you immediately.
Even breakfast is different. The video talked about families eating together in villages, taking their time, connecting.
Yeah, a shared meal before the day starts.
Whereas in the city, well, it's often grab and go, isn't it?
Hmm.
Or skipped altogether because you're running late. Very solitary.
Do you think that difference, that morning ritual, actually affects, community connection?
It probably does. The video sort of suggested those shared village meals reinforce bonds, a regular check-in point.
Whereas the city morning routine is much more individualistic, maybe contributes to feeling a bit more disconnected sometimes, though cities obviously offer other ways to connect.
True. And the evenings. Seems like a similar pattern.
Yeah, the video painted a picture of village evenings often spent outdoors, chatting with neighbors. Things are quieter.
Relaxed.
While in the city, after a long commute and a stressful day, people often just want to retreat indoors. They're drained.
Yeah, just shut the door and collapse.
It highlights the different kinds of demands, I think. The village evening seems set up for unwinding socially, informally. The city evening might offer more entertainment, sure, but maybe it's more about individual decompression.
It really paints two very distinct pictures of daily life. Okay, what about health? That's another huge area of contrast.
Well, the intuitive thing, and what the discussion backed up, is that village life seems to have some built-in health pluses.
Like being closer to nature.
Exactly. Cleaner air, generally speaking, access to fresher food, maybe grown locally, and just the lifestyle. Often more physical work, more movement integrated into the day.
Right, that natural activity level. But, and this is a big but, the video also stressed the healthcare access issue in villages.
That's the major trade-off, isn't it? The lifestyle might be healthier day to day, but if something serious happens, getting to a good hospital or a specialist quickly, that can be a real problem.
A massive hurdle.
Whereas cities, they usually have much better, faster access to medical care, hospitals, specialists. But you're dealing with pollution, often more stress, maybe food choices that aren't as healthy because convenience food is everywhere.
Do you think the mental health side plays a big role too? The city's constant noise and pace versus the village quiet.
Oh, almost certainly. That constant stimulation in the city can definitely contribute to stress, anxiety. Village life might offer more inherent calm, more chances to just breathe. But even just basic physical activity, like we said, village life often involves more walking, more physical tasks. City life can be very sedentary for many people, desk jobs, long commutes, sitting down.
True. And we can't forget emergency care. That seemed critical in the discussion.
Absolutely critical. The video really brought home how delays in getting treatment in rural areas just because of distance or maybe bad roads can literally be life or death.
It's a stark reality. Now, the discussion wasn't all rosy about village life either. It pointed out some really specific, tough challenges.
Definitely not just idyllic peace and quiet. Infrastructure is often a huge issue.
Like roads.
Yeah, poor roads, especially when it rains heavily. Getting anywhere, getting goods in or out, accessing markets or healthcare, it can become incredibly difficult. And things we might take for granted, like reliable electricity.
Power cuts.
Frequent power cuts, yeah. And even access to clean drinking water is still a struggle in some areas. These are basic necessities.
Absolutely. And then beyond the infrastructure, the video really hammered home the lack of job opportunities in many villages.
Yeah,
That seems to be the main push factor for moving to the city.
it really does. People might want to stay, love their community, but if there's no way to earn a decent living, what choice do they have?
And that leads to that feeling of displacement, doesn't it? Homesickness.
A huge emotional burden. The video touched on people moving to the city for work and just deeply missing home, the connections, the pace of life they left.
What kind of support exists for them, though, when they make that move?
That's a great question, and the video kind of suggested not much. Often, that lack of networks is the barrier. It implied poverty in villages often isn't about people not working hard. They are hardworking, but there just aren't enough jobs.
So hard work doesn't automatically mean getting ahead.
Not if the opportunities aren't there. Now, contrast that with cities, which usually have, well, a much wider range of jobs, more chances for training, even starting a small business, perhaps.
Okay, more options.
But, and the video hinted at this too, people coming from villages face hurdles accessing those city opportunities. They might not have the contacts, the networks, they might not know how the urban job market even works, or how to get funding for a small business idea.
And that ties back to education again, right?
Exactly. Even if someone gets a good education in the village or manages to get educated in the city, if there are no jobs back home that use those skills, they still might feel stuck, forced to stay in the city or be underemployed in the village.
It all seems connected.
It is. It comes down to that fundamental desire for a better life, right? And right now, for many, that seems to point towards the city, mainly for economic reasons. That economic pull is incredibly strong.
So wrapping up this deep dive then, looking at village versus city life, what's the main takeaway for people listening?
Well, I think it's just really clear that both ways of life have their own distinct pluses and minuses across everything: education, health, daily life, money.
Yeah, no single answer.
No, neither one is just flat out better. It's always a trade-off. What you gain in one area, you might lose in another.
It's a really complex balancing act, isn't it? Choosing where to live, it's deeply personal, lots of compromises involved. And it seems like education and maybe even more so economic opportunity are often the biggest drivers pushing people one way or the other.
Which leaves us with a final thought, maybe something for you, the listener, to chew on. Given everything we've talked about, these differences, these gaps,
Well,
what kind of fundamental changes could actually bridge that divide? What could help close the opportunity gap between villages and cities so people could genuinely thrive wherever they choose to call home?